Shalom Chavarim. I was just studying the Megillah 12a, and it came to this part of the page, and it's talking about discussing the verse in Esther chapter 1, verse 5 and 6. Actually, verse 6 here. It says, there were hangings of white fine cotton and blue, held with cords of fine linen and purple wool, upon silver rods and marble pillars. The couches of gold were silver, were on a pavement of green and white and shell onyx marble. And so the rabbis are discussing certain words. It says there were hangings of hur, which means the Rava said hur are tapestries made by needlework and thereby have many holes. And Shmuel said hur is white wool he spread out for them. And also Rav understands hur to mean a hole. Shmuel understands it to mean white. And then it comes to another question. What is the definition of KARPAS? Our Yossi Bar Chinina said cushions of fine wool. And so I see that here in the Hebrew, and KARPAS, which is fine cotton, here it says in the book of Esther. But also I remember in Bereshis in chapter 37, talking about Yosef's tunic in chapter 37, verse 3, it says, now Israel loved Yosef more than all his sons, since he was a child of his old age, and he made him a fine woolen tunic, katonis pasim. And Rashi even comments on katonis pasim. It's like karpas and turquoise wool. And even in the footnotes, it quotes the Megillah that I'm actually reading, the Gemara Megillah 12a, that says it's a combination of kar, which means cushion, padding, and pas in the singular, which means fine wool. And so when I went to Genesis 37 as well, just because I've learned this in the past, and it says katona pasim, and really the sages say karpas. This is what we dip in Pesach. This is what we usually do in the Pesach Seder with the parsley. I'm going to talk about that. Pas can mean robe. It's derived from Yosef's tunic, and kar can mean sail. So the sail of the Zadik, the robe, and we go, I have an amazing Haggadah here, and it even goes further into Joseph's robe. It says there is one event that can point to the very first in long sequence of events. So it talks about Joseph's beautiful robe and the selling of Joseph as a slave, and the robe was called katona pasim, a fine woolen robe. Commenting on the word pasim, Rashi relates it to karpas, and connected with Esther 1:6. And what else is also the karpas at the Seder thus evokes Joseph's coat, the object that led to the exile. And we dip the karpas into either water with salt, or some customs with vinegar. And anyway, the first dipping alludes to the brothers dipping Joseph's coat into animal blood to fool Yaakov into thinking that Joseph had been devoured by a wild animal. The second dipping alludes to when God commanded us to dip a hyssop into blood and place the blood on the doorpost prior to the plague of the firstborn. And it's interesting because karpas, katona pasim, also has the hard kaf and a hard pay, which can mean like final. And the kaf and the pay represent final, and is also alludes to Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. And even this reminds me of a verse that Yeshua himself said, that no man has a place to lay his head. And this is mean, don't get comfortable. A fine cushions of wool, don't get comfortable with being the Zadik. And it's just interesting that hur can mean whole, and white. Interesting that the Zadik was pierced with holes and sins were turned white. Just a little thought there. And what about Yosef? Well, even Rashi says that when the brothers took the robe, they dipped it in goat's blood. And he says, a male of the goats, its blood resembles that of a man. Interesting things that I was just studying a little bit earlier. Thought I'd share. And the Mashiach, interesting things with the connection of Yosef and the KARPAS, the fine wool linen, and it's in the book of Esther, KARPAS, which Mordecai was a Zadik who was supposed to be hung and pierced maybe, but anyway, hung. And Haman is the one that gets hung. And when we drink on Purim, we celebrate, but we sometimes drink so much where we can't tell if it's the king hanging or the Rasha. And so just a little bit of thoughts there. Nothing concrete, just sharing what I'm learning from the Megillah. Hope you enjoyed. Shavua Tov.